Hi, my name's Rob Scott from UC Today, and in this Talking Team session, I'm joined by Randy Chapman from Simity and Tom Arbuthnot from Modality Systems. And we're going to be talking about how to create a winning UC migration plan on Microsoft Teams. So welcome, Randy, and welcome, Tom.
Hey, Rob.
Thanks very much. Yeah.
Good place to start, gents. Let's have a quick round of introductions. Randy, would you like to go first?
Yeah, so Randy Chapman, I guess lead architect, modern workplace architect at Simity. Been here about 5 months, but I'm no stranger to the UC world. I've been kind of in that space for 10, 20 years. Done PBXs and Microsoft technologies for a long time. Got bitten by the link bug early on. Did my first migration in about 2009, thereabouts, and kind of been doing it really ever since. Microsoft MVP, for the last 2 years. Yeah, all that stuff. Blogger, podcaster, YouTuber, the whole shebang. Yeah.
A seasoned pro, as they say. So welcome, Randy.
I tried to be. Thanks for having me.
And welcome, Tom.
Yeah, hey, so Tom Arbuthnot, Principal Solutions Architect at Modality Systems, and similar to Randy, focused mostly on Microsoft Teams. Been in the space for too long, originally Cisco World, now Microsoft World, so lots to lean on in terms of customer stories around Teams and telephony.
Fantastic. And so in the next 20 minutes or so, I'm looking for, to extract as much knowledge from you as possible. So to really kick off the conversation, let's first define why we're here. We're talking connecting voice or cloud voice nowadays. I'm hearing more and more, or telephony to your Microsoft Teams collaboration environment. So Randy, just to talk through some of the common challenges that you're seeing customers facing out there right now. What kinds of things are cropping up more and more?
Well, obviously, there's, considering that the world is in a global pandemic, there's obviously some challenges around that. I'm not sure how much specific you want to go into that, but the biggest challenge organizations are facing right now with that specifically is the fact their offices are closed and they've got to go home. And if they've got a traditional PBX, in a broom cupboard, connected to ISDN lines with phones on desks, the common thing that we hear a lot is, I've had to go home, but my phone doesn't work when I go there. It has to remain on the desk, and they can't redirect their phone numbers. They can't take a phone call, make a phone call. So a lot of companies have really in a hurry, panic bought some sort of system to get them to work from anywhere. It could be mobile phones, it could be line forwarding or number forwarding, that sort of thing, to mobile numbers. Then what do you do? Is it somebody's personal mobile? There's all that to consider. That's probably the biggest challenge for this day and age. The offices are open, their offices are closed, they're open again, now they're closed. Who knows what's going to happen next week with the government we've got. So yeah, trying to make that distributed workforce actually work together is the biggest challenge in terms of UC space as well. So not just telephony, but trying to bring all those people that are used to sitting next to each other actually on the same page in the same room, if you like. And that's always been a big kind of selling point of UC in general, even back from the OCS days, trying to make a big company very small and kind of feel. But yeah, taking the desk phone away is probably the biggest one, I can say.
So Tom, and large enterprises aren't any stranger to Microsoft Teams, but a lot of organizations aren't used to kind of connecting voice into that environment. So really using it as a phone system, as a telephony platform, whatever you want to call it, as a full UCaaS platform.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. So there's, last public numbers were 75 million daily active users. But you've got to say that the vast majority of that is collaboration and meetings still. Like telephony is really busy now, particularly because of COVID, as Randy said. But lots of people are on the journey, either away from Skype for Business server if they're telephony, or from traditional Cisco or Avaya desk phone type stuff. So there's still a big journey, and big enterprises historically move very slow with this. But we've seen a massive change to just getting it done now because everybody's at home. So suddenly all the process and endless design stuff has gone out the window a bit. And it's like we just need to spin up soft phones and keep working right now.
Hmm.
So what's the first stage of this kind of migration plan? So I'm an organization. I know I'm hearing about using Microsoft Teams as a phone system solution as well. What's the first stage of that migration plan that you need to consider?
So I always say it's about knocking down the dependencies. So, replacing anything with anything, you need to figure out what you have, and then you need to figure out what the end state is. So, obviously there's some surveys around that. You need to make sure that, do you have any phones that are in broom cupboards or analog devices and those kind of common things. But then you've also got to consider the end state. You got to make sure that when you move to a soft phone type of situation, that the network and everything can handle it. And then the biggest challenge, I think, from any respect, is the adoption side. And I know you've got a question later on specifically around adoption, but it's making sure the users go from that physical phone on the desk to a headset. It's not everybody's go-to preference when they're moving from one to the other. They like that comfort feel of the buttons on the actual desk itself, on the phone itself rather. And being able to pick up that receiver to make and receive phone calls. So I don't even know where I'm going with this question, but yeah, it's all about that. You need to think about the dependencies. You need to think about where you're starting and how you get there, and then what your end state is. And you need to have all those three things in mind. Definitely.
Tom, what would you say around the kind of external SIP trunking element? Making external calls, direct routing versus calling plans.
Yeah, so you got two high level options. You either go with Microsoft directly with their calling plan. So in that case, you're paying Microsoft to be your telco and to have the numbers. And usually in a migration scenario, customers want to keep their own end user numbers. So you'll be porting your numbers into Microsoft. And just like any other carrier, they're a licensed carrier. They're in 16 countries. But they work on bundles of minutes per user. So you're buying a bundle per user. And then those bundles accrue are based on the same plan in the same country. So you know with a bundle of minutes to burn down, then you go on to per minute credits. Or you bring your own carrier and or your own SBC, your gateway techie box that connects the carrier and the cloud. And there's so many options on the market there because you can go with a carrier that will host that all for you and do it zero touch to you. You can have your own SBCs that you hug on site, interrupt with your existing PBX, that kind of thing. You can put your own virtual ones in Azure. But the high level options are go with Microsoft or go with third party carrier, and you can mix and match those two as well.
Are most organizations kind of defaulting to one or the other?
So most are direct routing purely because calling plans are only in 16 countries. And well, I say most, like the customers probably Randy and I tend to deal with more multi-country, so they end up doing direct routing for some, therefore direct routing for all makes sense. The other thing is commercially, lots of customers have existing carrier relationships with deals signed and good minutes, and Microsoft have minutes, but I wouldn't say it was aggressively priced. So commercial and coverage is leaning to direct routing, but what I am seeing is spots of calling plan where it makes sense for certain customers. Like they've got an office in Italy with 5 people. It's not even worth the conversation about direct routing. They can just turn on calling plans of 5 users for a few bucks a month like that.
Unless you can centralize the direct routing for a region. For instance, you can have a European specific direct routing service stood up in Azure or a central data center, with trunks that kind of span all those countries around there. Then yeah, if you're doing office specific, or you've got a big pocket in North America, as Tom says, 5 users in Italy, yeah, it doesn't make any commercial sense to. Well, one, you can't physically stretch that SBC infrastructure in the States to cover to cover Europe. You can, but it's not going to be great. But then 2, it's just cost prohibitive. To buy some calling plans for, what is it, £9 for local. It's kind of a no-brainer, really.
Got it. And when you go onto a kind of direct routing kind of system setup, what's the user experience like versus maybe a calling plan setup with Microsoft?
I mean, essentially identical. It's transparent to the
Yeah.
user. Really, they're just showing numbers, so it makes no difference. It's the back end that's different. The user experience is identical.
Yeah.
Great. So although
In both cases, they get a dial pad and that's it. They make a phone call, receive a phone call. Yeah.
Great. So although you're using a different network, the experience is exactly the same to the user.
Yeah, and it's important to understand with direct routing, it can be a cloud service. So you don't have to have kit and deal with kit to go direct routing. You can go to lots and lots of different carriers who run it as a service, and it's just another cloud service. They'll do all the work to make it connected.
Great. Well, that makes good sense. So in terms of rolling the phone system element out, just from your perception, what's involved in actually rolling Microsoft Teams phone system out and starting to use it as a full kind of telephony platform? Is it? Would you say that it's a huge project for most, or can it be quite straightforward?
What budget have you got, Rob? I mean, it depends on the business a lot as to how huge the project is. I mean, you can go very, very fast with this stuff, but the important thing, and Randy said at the top of the conversation, is how open the business is to change. So the issues are rarely technical. They're users. I used to like my desk phone with its blue lights, and I don't have a desk phone. Your desk phone has green lights. The important thing is to have the business know why they're doing it. And like a documented why, like we want to be more agile, we need to do it to survive in COVID, we want to save money, and then it's a case of measuring the business's ability to embrace that change. So like we've had customers do it incredibly fast, and yes, users sometimes say, well, this is suboptimal, but it's like, well, the business is doing it, we're going for it, we need to do it. But if you work in somewhere like FinServe or somewhere where the users are super powerful and important, you have to tread very, very lightly because the users are more important than IT or half the business. So keeping them happy, like almost to the level of like personal training and floor walkers and spending time with their PAs, those are the big variables.
So you mentioned user adoption. We said we'd bring this up. So user adoption is a key part of this, and so how do we ensure that users do adopt Microsoft Teams as a full collaboration and communication platform?
Yeah, the adoption project kind of happens and it coincides with the engineering side as well. So they're kind of almost two work streams. Generally, there's a PM at the top or something, but generally you'll have some sort of information gathering about the people to study their habits, how resistant they are to change, and really there's some common methodologies that most adoption practices actually use, and it's the ProSci and ADKAR kind of methodology. And Microsoft put together a framework. It was called the SOF, and now it's called something else, and it's probably called something else next week or whatever. But an adoption practice kind of takes a lot of those things on board, but then uses the cool things from the ProSci and ADKAR type stuff to make sure that they can take people from on the journey from one thing to the other. And it's about finding those people, as I said, that are resistant to the change and changing their mind and making it become a habit for them to use something in their daily lives. I've done training many times, and you'll always have that heckler at the back saying, "Oh, I don't want to use it for anything else but making a phone call." Well, that's fine. That you can use it for whatever you want. The other 90 people in the room are going to use it for instant message, and they might send you something, and you might miss out on a key conversation. So just keep that in mind. And it's about keeping them happy on the journey. Communication is really, really key, and stakeholder communication is critically important. So getting buy-in from the staff usually involves getting a rock star in the organization to send that message out. As Tom says, tell them why you're doing it. Is it to be agile? Is it to be more flexible during COVID? Is it to communicate better with partners and suppliers, customers, and the like? Is it all those things? Is it just because your PBX is 45 years old and really you could do with that big room that it's been sitting in since 1963? It could be any of those things, but find a rock star that has some influence and some sway and that people like in the organization, and then have that message come top down is my big key takeaway for that. and they'll respect that decision, hopefully, and they'll feel involved in the project all along the way, and they might be a bit happier about it.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. Some good points there. Tom, would you want to add to that at all?
I guess only that I agree with all of that stuff. Like, we're talking about telephony on this particular show, but like, telephony is a piece of the puzzle. So you wouldn't generally go out and just say, here's why we're doing telephony. You need to tell the biggest team story, because I think Teams is a collaboration platform that does telephony in that order, as opposed to a telephony platform that does collaboration. So there are things that the old PBX would have done that Teams probably doesn't do. So you have to get over that hump of like, this is why we're going down this digital cloud first. We all want to collaborate more. Telephony is one of the easiest things for adoption, in the sense of, if the phone number goes to that client, they either have to answer it or not, and if they don't, presumably they're not doing their job. So, but conversely, it's one of the hard ones, because people can sort of ignore instant messaging, only attend meetings occasionally, but they can't ignore their landline or their phone number. So it's the one that generates the most noise, because you're literally changing something they've probably done for years and years. But I think it's telling the whole story about cloud and agile and moving fast, and telephony is part of that puzzle.
Great, thanks. Some really good points there as well. So I may be going slightly off piste a little bit, but security has been a major issue. It's been in the news constantly this year, across collaboration platforms, video conferencing platforms. And, as we're talking about this, planning a migration to use, Microsoft Teams as a phone system as well, security comes into it again. So how do we protect our full kind of Microsoft Teams UC environment?
Yeah, so to start off with, if you read the documentation from Microsoft, they say that Microsoft 365 is inherently secure, and I would fully agree. It's, there's a long list of stuff that I won't bore you with on measures they take for security of the platform itself. The data centers that it sits in, the microservices, everything is inherently secure. But there are, of course, easy ways to make it unsecure, if you like. If we're talking specifically about voice, then it's about, how you get your numbers in, and, to Tom's point, you got calling plans or you got direct routing. Those are the two options. And calling plans, it's Microsoft's problem to make sure that it's secure. And, when it comes to voice, security is around, making sure that the network that the numbers are delivered on is secure, so you can prevent against toll fraud. For instance, somebody hacking your system to make a phone call to some weird and wonderful country, and to all their friends, set up chat lines and those sort of things. And also just, if they're the SBC and the infrastructure is your responsibility, you need to make sure the carrier is going to be able to protect against that. But then you need to harden the SBC itself, the session border controller, and the infrastructure. ISDN, it's almost impossible to make it unsecure unless you put a tap on the line like they show in the Die Hard movies and whatnot. But, with SIP, it's over the internet. So, it's critical to make sure that the signaling on the media is encrypted where possible, or you have a private instance, kind of line between you and the carrier, some sort of cross connector, that kind of thing. Or, VPNs aren't usually a good idea, but, last ditch would be, making sure that the firewall that protects the session border controller and the infrastructure itself, maybe locks down and only accepts traffic, and can send traffic between itself and the carrier. So those kind of things are what springs to mind. And session border controllers also have additional measures of security to drop packets, for what's the SIP fishes and those kind of things. Kind of some sort of SIP firewalls. I mean, there's SIP firewalls in general anyway, but they actually have an extra level of it's not virus protection, but it's fraud protection that you can enable on them. So, making sure the posture is well, and reducing that attack surface as much as possible. And there's all kinds of other things with phones and personal security and stuff, but those are all real big considerations.
Yeah, certainly quite a lot to think about. Tom, do you want to add to that at all? Because you work with large enterprises as well.
Yeah, definitely. And Randy's spot on all of those things. And that's one of the things that, where you're having this total conversation about telephony, is who's configuring that stuff, who's responsible, who's accountable, who looks at the logs. This is where outsourcing direct routing might make sense. Like lots of big customers like having the SBCs because you own the routing yourself and you control it. But who's the operations team who patches those SBCs and maintains them and manages them? There's a lot of costs around direct routing that you need to be aware you're taking on operationally. And there's many good reasons to do it, particularly at big enterprise scale. It starts to make more sense. But as a project, it's not a one and done. There is some maintenance and operational overhead there to consider.
Yeah, so a perfect segue to my last question really was around these pro services. You mentioned it there as well. In terms of, a lot of organizations, small, maybe the smaller ones in the SMB market or the mid-market may not have these voice specialties or skills in-house. So, what advice would you give, Randy, to an organization looking at direct routing, looking to kind of expand this as a full phone system solution? And in terms of finding the right company to work with?
Yeah, I mean that's a really great question. I mean, we work with companies that are from the very small all the way to the ridiculously large, and all of them will have varying degrees of expertise internally. Most, if not almost all, will kind of shy away from the cloud voice side of Teams just because they don't have the expertise in it. I mean, to be really frank, if you look at the Teams admin center and all the stuff that's there for configuring certain things, it's relatively simple if you know what you're doing. It takes a little bit of practice. You need to kind of know the portal itself and what options you've got and those sort of things. It takes a little while to learn all that. And somebody that's indoctrinated in the Microsoft UC space, spanning back to Skype and Link and even before that, will almost get it generally. But then there's other aspects of it as well. So what about your session border controller infrastructure? You wouldn't automatically have skills internally to be able to wield an audio codes or a ribbon or an Oracle or anybody else's SBC from that growing list that's coming. Cisco and Nokia added recently. And then there's the phones and meeting spaces and everything else that comes with that as well. So what about vendor management there and device management there? So there's a lot of aspects to actually try and learn. And most companies are busy, rebuilding PCs and doing antivirus and making sure that the users themselves are secure and the files are secure and everything else. They don't have time to worry about voice and learning something new. There's always that person that knew the legacy PBX that thinks their job's going to go as soon as you replace that function, but hopefully they can evolve and do something more worthwhile after that's gone. But yeah, there's a lot to learn, and what you need to look for is to your point is experience. You need to find a company that has done it, it's been through the war, has the scars, the T-shirts, and everything else that goes with it. That is that has done something as complex and as sizable as the project that you've got in mind. I know one example of a company that did the whole thing in-house for a large number of users. We had a kind of a podcast recently about it, but that's pretty rare for somebody to take that on themselves. Most companies would outsource and do your homework, find out whether they've done it, find out and speak to the people. Just like if you're having a builder in to build a loft conversion, find the people they've done it for before and make sure that their house is still standing and that they're happy with their work. Really shop around and do your homework.
Great. And Tom, ongoing support, what are the options for, making sure the lights stay on and things were working ongoing?
Yeah. I guess that there is stuff to do there. So I'd say the cloud has brought the level of professional services you need down. Where you need the professional services is really upfront in strategy, decisions, and where you're going and what you're doing. Because, like as Randy said, the admin options and the admin center has got a lot easier. Once you know what you're doing, you're rolling. Direct routing adds some complexity, definitely. But there's this ongoing operational thing where do you really want session border controller experts in your in-house team? Like they need patching once a month. do you pay for an FTE in your IT team to deal with that, or do you just outsource that problem? And the whole thing expands out to the whole team. So the thing we do a lot at the moment is proactively looking at quality for customers. So looking at session quality and performance, and talking to the network team, talking to the end users compute team. What we recommend is take a RACI type approach of these are all the ongoing tasks you need to do. Which do you want to do in-house? Which do you want to outsource?
That's great. Well, we've gone through it end to end. I'm sure the audience have enjoyed this session today. I certainly have. Thank you, Randy. Thank you, Tom, for your time today.
No
Thanks
worries.
for having us.
And that's
Been
it
fun.
from us. If you've enjoyed today's session, do give us a quick like or share on social. It's always appreciated. I'm Rob Scott from UC Today. Thanks for watching.